All right, everybody, we're going to jump a little bit ahead here, 20th century. Some supplemental stuff and to make sure we get this all in due to the weather problems we've had this year. So we're going to talk about World War I, or the war to end all wars. There are several motives for the beginning of World War I, and most historians break it down to a thing called M.A.I.N. Militarism, alliances, industrialism, and nationalism. But much of this was economic, fueled by the imperial expansion during imperialism. It was an economic kind of era, phase, if you will, where the capitalistic practices that just commanded Europe during the 1800s caught fire. During the 1800s, as large, powerful industrial countries like Great Britain, like Germany, they will gobble up smaller, tinier nationalities and countries. Many of these countries are rich in natural resources. And so it's difficult to maintain that balance of power that was created by the Congress of Vienna. Each country, each European country outdid each other. They would trample on each other to try and get more colonies. The more power and importance each country felt based on the number of colonies that it had. I am not only wealthy because I have more gold and silver than my neighbors like the transatlantic trade, I am more powerful when I have more colonies than my neighbor. So another motive to this is to gain military superiority over your neighbors. Each European country believed the more colonies, the more power they had, and they commanded that importance on the world stage. Now, unfortunately, this is going to have a domino effect as each country will constantly fight to be larger and more powerful than anyone else. And so we're going to get to the nationalism phase here in a second. And along with this, secret alliance systems are going to begin to be built. These are defensive agreements where one country seeks to secure its position. Hey, if we get into a fight with that country, will you agree not to jump in? And eventually this is going to wind up with the Triple Alliance, or the Central Powers here outlined in red, the big powers in Central Europe: Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Right? They will face off the Triple Entente, the Allies. The two old enemies, England and France, become allies, and Mother Russia over here. These alliances are going to be incredible. And here's what I was just talking about, where the rivalries over colonial competition goes crazy. Germany is a latecomer into this game as they create their imperial empire very late. They did not become a unified country until 1871. But since they're late, they are really aggressive in gaining ground. England and France have already carved up most of the world at this point. And so here's where nationalism is going to begin to play a role. Nationalism is the binding of a country together through basic national pride. Now, you guys may know the biggest example of nationalism you guys know is probably me. Just look around the room here. But where nationalism is a strong force in Europe at the turn of the 1900s, it will lead to a massive rivalry between France and Germany, especially over this disputed territory known as Alsace and Lorraine that has been disputed going back all the way to Charlemagne's idiot grandsons. Germany is very proud of their ability to unify. It had beaten France in the Franco-Prussian War. Well, France, on the other hand, was very embarrassed They had lost. They were supposed to be this big, giant, massive power. And they were angry at their loss of this territory in the Franco-Prussian War. And they want nothing better than to get back at Germany. And we have this other thing called militarism, which is the glorification of warfare. It's all the good stuff. Hey, I became a hero when I did this. Or, oh man, in this barn we found, a bunch of gold. Or down in this basement we found these old kegs of wine. It's the good stuff, the fun stuff that Grandpa talks about. Where everyone is a hero, everyone's a Julius Caesar, everyone's an Alexander the Great. Nobody gets hurt, nobody gets shot, nobody gets wounded. It's all the fun stuff. Well, Europe had enjoyed about 100 years of peace, except for the Crimean War between the Ottoman Empire and Mother Russia mainly, and some smaller wars of Bismarck, like the Franco-Prussian War. Not since Napoleon's time had there been such a large-scale war. Nobody in Europe really remembers the horrific side of war. So by the late 1800s, there was a feeling of militarism. Flags were unfurled, bugles blared, people cheered, yes, we're going off to war. If you've seen the old movie Joey the Warhorse, when people thought this was going to be great, a big time, it was a fun party. The powers of Europe had greatly expanded their armies. They had massive modern weapons of war, and everyone thought this was going to be a grand adventure. Well, nationalism will create new countries like Germany and Italy. But nationalism will weaken old school monarchies like the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and even the Ottoman Empire. And so, with nationalism playing a massive role here in Eastern Europe, many small Eastern European countries were Slavic, which meant that they were descended from Russians. And there was a stirring among nationalism among these smaller Slavic countries that they felt had been belittled and gobbled up by the larger Austria-Hungarian Empire. All right. Austrians, German-speaking Austrians, were the minority in this gigantic empire. Those that weren't bullied by the Austrians felt the Ottomans were doing the exact same thing. Nationalistic movements were further complicated when Russia claimed that it was duty-bound to protect all Slavic nations from any more aggression due to threats from these larger empires. So a tiny little conflict in a portion of Europe, known as the Balkans, can lead to a much larger affair. And so we're going to do a quick lead up to the assassination. We all know about the assassination. Then we're going to talk about the war, so we should be done here hopefully in about 20 minutes. Now, the alliance systems, if we want to back up here, were some of the most complicated in all of world history. The balance of power created by Clemens von Metternich at the Congress of Vienna was changed forever by Germany. Austria, when they are defeated by Germany, loses territory. The French had lost honor and power during the Franco-Prussian Wars. And it is German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck that knew that Germany's position was very precarious. They were surrounded, as you can see, on either side by different countries. They are boxed in geographically. So Bismarck wants to make sure that France and any other power, especially Austria or Mother Russia, would never, ever become allies. Otherwise, Germany would be surrounded. And Bismarck will say several times that Germany cannot afford to fight a two-front war, one in the east and one in the west. So he establishes a thing known as the Three Emperors League. That was an agreement between Germany, Austria, and Russia. It held the Central and Eastern powers of Europe into an alliance. However, over time, the old Ottoman Empire, which had fell behind in industrialization, begins to show signs of weakness. Russia breaks the agreement by proclaiming it would defend all the Slavs, especially when there was a rebellion in Bosnia against the Ottoman Empire. Russia was still hoping to get some expansion and gain the coveted city of Constantinople if the Ottoman Empire would collapse. They're still after, honest to God, a warm water port. The Ottoman Empire, faced with the threat of Russian intervention, asks for a new peace agreement in 1878, known as the Sans-Stefano Accords, Sansstefano. And this gives some Ottoman territories their freedom as independent states. Some territories, but not all of them. So the ones that were independent were psyched. Those that weren't were still angry. Well, this action will terrify Austria and England. England wants to protect the balance of power in the Mediterranean Sea down here by blocking any Russian access to the Mediterranean Sea. Austria-Hungary simply did not like Russia interfering into its territories. So at an international conference in Berlin, Austria-Hungary annexes the Slavic states. Now, these territories just gain their freedoms from the Ottomans, and they are immediately taken over by the Austrians. They're free for just a couple of hours. Tensions were running high. Russia does not like being forced into accepting smaller territory, and it's clear that the Western countries do not like and will not help them. Ottoman Bismarck capitalizes on all of this when he realizes that Russia is really mad. So he forms this secret alliance with Austria, known as the Dual Alliance, in which both countries agree that if neither country was attacked by Russia, the other country would either help them or stay neutral. So if we go to war against Russia, we're at worst going to stay neutral. At best, Germany and Austria are going to team up. Russia, who had always felt isolated, is now isolated even further. Bismarck is completely aware of all of this, and so he tries to sweet talk and cajole Russia back into the Three Emperors League. In 1882, Bismarck will form the Triple Alliance with Italy. Under the leadership of King Victor Emmanuel, Italy wanted to gain colonies like other European powers. And Italy was really bitter that France had taken territory down in North Africa, claiming that, you were taking part of the old Roman Empire. To Bismarck, this is great. He now had Austria and Hungary as allies with him. Both Italy and Austria were friendly with Great Britain, meaning that France was further isolated. So Bismarck is isolated not only, if we go back one, he's not only isolated Russia, but he has also isolated France. But in 1888, King Wilhelm, Kaiser William of Germany dies, and things begin to unravel. His son William fires Bismarck, who said he did not want to be a puppet to the German chancellor. Now, however underhanded and Machiavellian Bismarck was, Germany is on a path to becoming one of the most dominant powers in the world. But when Bismarck is fired, all of his secret alliances and maneuvering falls apart. When this happens, none of the treaties were renewed, and the two countries which Bismarck had isolated. France and Russia are looking around for anyone who would be their friend. Would anyone like to be our friend? Privet, comrade, we have never had friends. Russia, be happy, be your friend. So France and Russia are now friends. When Kaiser Wilhelm could not persuade his cousin, King George of England, to join the Triple Alliance, the two become quick rivals. The British response to all of this is to form something known as the Entente Cordiale, Cordiale, Cord, Cordiale, or it means translated friendly agreement. As Germany, Austria, and Italy became known as the Central Powers, their anger and distrust led the great Western powers to form their own counter-alliances. France and Russia formed one in 1894, and England had been seeking alliances as well. First with Japan, in order to have an ally against Russia in the Pacific. So all of a sudden, things look tense. Enter the role of Bosnia and Serbia. These were small Slavic countries that wanted their independence in the Balkans. They had forever been trapped between the Ottomans and Austria-Hungary. More radical nationalistic elements saw Serbia as a centerpiece for this brand new nation. Serbia wants to unite all the Slavs and break away from the Austria-Hungarian Empire. Other nations see this and they try and intervene before things break out. But at an international peace conference, Russia and Austria support each other's demands. Austria wants to take over Bosnia, and Russia wants access to the Black and Aegean Seas. Having a port on the Black Sea would give them their long sought-after warm water port. The British, still concerned about the Mediterranean, reject this. And this puts a strain on the new relationship. Slavic nationalists did not like Bosnia being gobbled up by Austria, and so nationalism comes back into play. Russia felt betrayed and too weak to do anything about it. They talk a big game, but when push comes to shove, they fold. So, the failure of Great Britain and France to support their new Russian allies strained their alliance. And then on June 28th, 1914, and a long story, if we have time, I'll tell you in class, the old premier, Franz Joseph, is too old to go on a tour of his countries, of the Austria-Hungarian Empire. So he sends his nephew, the heir to the throne, Franz Ferdinand. And he is going to land in Sarajevo on June 28th. Now, way back in the 1300s, Bosnia, Sarajevo, was conquered on June 28th, 1368. They briefly win their independence on June 28, 1911, for a couple hours from the Ottoman Empire. Then they are gobbled up by the Austrians. And so on that date, the date they won their independence, the day they lost their independence, the future emperor says he's going to visit them on that date. And they're like dirty scumbags. They know exactly what this date means to us. So a group, nationalistic group, known as the Black Hand, decides that they are going to assassinate the Archduke. It is probably the worst assassination attempt in history. It's a debacle, but the young man on the right there, Gavrilo Princip, succeeds. When he does, war is about ready to break out. There are 11 steps to warfare. We probably don't need to know them. A month after the assassination, on July 28th, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Ask me in class, I'll tell you the story. Why they waited a month, I don't really know. On July 29th, Russia mobilizes its troops to protect their Slavic allies. Problem is, mobilization is an act of war. All right, it means you get your men and your equipment ready. You don't mobilize unless you're going to fight. And that is true in all cases except for maybe Russia. Because they're so big, it's going to take a long time for the war to start. Well, when that happens, when Russia begins to mobilize, Germany jumps the gun and they declare war on Russia. When Russia has war declared on them, France must jump in and help out their ally. They begin to mobilize against Germany. And all of a sudden, what should be a war between Austria-Hungary and tiny little Serbia gets the major powers, England, France, Russia, Germany, Austria, Italy, and the Ottoman Empire into warfare. Well, on August 3rd, Germany declares war on France and they invade Belgium. Belgium won't let the Germans through. They are trying to stay neutral. But England had declared that if Belgium is invaded, they are going to jump in. And so just as Otto von Bismarck had feared a two-front war for Germany, that is exactly what happens. But a general named Alfred von Schlieffen had come up with a plan to avoid this, with a plan known as the Schlieffen Plan. He said it'll take Russia very long to get their military mobilized, so Germany can land a quick killer knockout blow against France by marching through Belgium and then sweeping, south and west, knock out Paris. Once that is done, they can turn and they can fight Mother Russia. So as war breaks out, Europe, as I said, was excited. There had not been a large war for years. The Triple Entente believed they had more men. The British Navy believed a win would be easy. But the Germans began to execute the Schlieffen Plan. The general in charge was actually winning. He was within miles of succeeding when all of a sudden he stops. And when he stops, the French launch their own offensive, known as Plan 17. You're never going to need to know this. And stalemate begins. The French dig in. They put their trust in a large offensive, which wound up failing. And a war zone is going to exist from Switzerland 1,000 miles to the North Sea. And this is where we get stereotypical trench warfare. The war was supposed to be short. There was a thing in Europe known as summer wars, fought between the spring planting in April and May and the fall harvesting in October and November. It was supposed to be over by Christmas. Everybody is supposed to win honor and glory in a short war and back up the family name, and it was just not to be so. So here are a look at some of the trenches and how the war is going to progress for the better part of 4 years. Wars of attrition, where you dug in a line of defenses. You would have to jump out and cross what is known as no man's land and just send many of your guys into certain death. You guys may have seen They Shall Never Grow Old or Wonder Woman. It was just using old school tactics with modern weapons. The trenches were full of water and rats and lice, and they used to have contests to see who could kill the most, and then the guys had to begin to eat them. We're using 16 and 1700s fighting techniques with 20th century technology. And here's what we are going to have. Number one is the machine gun. All right, a gun that will fire multiple rounds. We also have rifles that can shoot farther and faster than any rifle in history. The tank will be used for the very first time. 1903, down in Duck, Wilbur and Orville Wright will begin to fly. World War II is when we see planes being used in warfare for the first time. And then there is the brand new thing, the undersea boat or the submarine. And there's also, as you can see on this, poor horse and this soldier and these guys, poison gas, mustard or chlorine gas will be used, mass death. On the Eastern Front, Russia will get mobilized faster than anyone had thought, but they are going to fall into a major problem I'm going to do in another video known as the Russian Revolution. So, the problem for Germany comes in a few problems. Number one, as Great Britain began to blockade German ports and German manpower was grinding to a halt. The Germans had captured a lot of territory and they put their defenses down and said, if you want us to leave, you have to drive us out. But they were nearing the limits on their manpower. And so the Prime Minister makes a decision, or the King, to have unlimited submarine warfare again. Attack any ship going into England. If we could starve the British out, maybe they will stop. So, Great Britain in the Atlantic becomes a war zone where not even neutral countries were safe. When the British ship, the Lusitania, is sunk with 138 American passengers on board, President Woodrow Wilson says, look, Kaiser Wilhelm, you do that again, the United States will be forced to intervene on behalf of the Entente Cordiale. So, we fight through 1916, 1917. After making no progress in their land battles, the Germans renew their submarine warfare, and they sink more American ships. Coupled with that, British intelligence, MI5, intercepts a thing known as the Zimmermann telegram, where Germany, a German ambassador, was encouraging Mexico to invade the United States through our southern border. Germany would support them and they could get the American Southwest from Texas to California back. That tips the scale, and by saying that America must make the world safe for democracy, on April 6, 1917, the United States declares war on Germany. The end of the fighting is going to take place on November 11th, 1918. America's entry is key because just as we entered, the Russian Revolution will begin to break out in March of 1917. As the Romanov dynasty is overthrown and the monarchical rule of the Tsar is done, Russia has to withdraw from the conflict. This was the high point of the war for Germany, as now they could focus on Great Britain and France. Everybody was approaching the limits of their manpower. But with the United States entering, commanded by American General John Pershing, a large counteroffensive takes place as the United States will fight from Verdun on the Meuse-Argonne battlefield. It is the largest offensive that the United States has ever been in. 1.5 million American soldiers and Marines. The American shatters the German defense known as the Hindenburg Line, and so German Prime Minister Ludendorff decides to sue for peace before Germany was beaten and destroyed. Key thing to remember, no foreign soldier had ever set their foot on German territory. Ludendorff wants to protect the German citizens by seeking a peace. There's 13 million dead. Europe is financially ruined. And so the Germans are promised minor reparations if they create a new democratic government. The German government asked for peace on what was known as President Wilson's 14 points. 14 points of peace. What was a utopian view of the world where everyone's going to be independent, every nationality will be represented, free trade, free shipping, disputes will be used to solve problems, not military warfare, and we're going to create this new thing known as the League of Nations. This is going to prevent a war like World War I, then called the Great War, to make sure that nothing like that ever happened again. And so the Social Democratic Party will be in charge to protect the West from the growing movement of communism. So an armistice is signed. Key word right there at the top. An armistice is a ceasefire. We just stop fighting. There is no winner. There is no loser. November the 11th at 11 a.m., the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour. 13 million people were killed and wounded. Many people are homeless as the fields and livestock were destroyed in France and Belgium. But where the Germans were promised a mild settlement, reparations payments, that is not to be so. And the German people will feel betrayed. And while the German army was never ever defeated, it was never pushed back. Foreigners never crossed into Germany, yet Germany is badly punished in the peace settlement. And the new German government allows the Allies to claim that they had beaten Germany. And so, with 13 million dead, the world changes. The old monarchical empires were gone. The 600-year-old Austrian Habsburg Empire, gone. The 600-year-old Ottoman Empire, gone. The 400-year-old Romanov dynasty of Russia is gone. Western Europe, who was once the creditors of the world, are now in large debt. People who had only been known to be ruled by a monarchy don't know what to do. France and Belgium, physically devastated. Everyone with the loss of manpower. So this is the Percy Jackson effect as power shifts westward towards the United States. And so we are now going to sign the Treaty of Versailles, where Europe is forced to deal with the fact that they were no longer the center of the world. And the failure to adjust to this fact when they signed the Treaty of Versailles is what will lead directly to World War II. Now, the Treaty of Versailles is just a terrible thing. It's really 5 separate treaties, but when it comes down to it, it's the reparations payments. Germany promised to pay a reparations, a repair, to all civilian damage done by World War I. However, the United States handed our Lend-Lease bill, all the money and weapons that we lent or loaned to France and England during the war, they now had to pay up. When they saw how much they owed, they took bullet, split spot, cheerio, chap. We can't afford this. Oh, no, we do not have enough crates to pay these. They simply took their bill and attached it to the Germans. They were going to make the Germans pay their Lend-Lease bill. The term was $15 to $25 billion. Actually, nobody was really sure. So Germany was going to be told to pay $5 billion a year until 1921. Then they would be given a fixed amount and given 30 years to pay it off. Now, if you look at 15 to 25 billion and adjust it for today, it would be over $250 trillion. There's no way Germany can pay this back. Plus, the treaty separated Germans' industrial areas from their raw materials. So their iron ore and their coal and their bauxite that they could mine to bring to production facilities to turn into steel, they could sell that steel on the world market to pay their debts. Well, the iron ore and coal was separated from the production facilities. The production facilities were separated from the shipping areas, so they couldn't get it to the ocean, to the sea, where they could sell it. So Germany is told that they are forced to sign this treaty with no input. At the Treaty of Versailles are a series, of people. There is United States President Woodrow Wilson. From England, there is David Lloyd George. Prime Minister Clemenceau from France. King Victor Ocum Emmanuel from Italy. And from Japan, the Emperor's brother Prince Konye. But no Germany or Russia. They weren't even invited. So the Germans will claim that they were presented with a treaty they were forced to sign. Plus, Germany has territory taken away, and there was a demilitarized zone 30 miles into Germany where Germany wasn't allowed to tread. Germany is no longer allowed to have a military. They're not allowed to produce industrial weapons for a military. And British economist John Maynard Keynes, guy that invented Keynesian economics, writes an article critical of the treaty. He calls it a Carthaginian peace, where he said, what you guys have done to Germany isn't making another war impossible. Instead, you're making it probable. So the British had spit spot, let's get the fish and chips out of here, and they go home. Woodrow Wilson, who was drawn coming to Europe in a toga with, olive crown on his head, olive laurels, is now dressed as a court jester. And he's bent over with his butt in the shape of the continental United States, and Europe is kicking him out. His plans are mocked. Now, we can make fun of our president. Saturday Night Live can make fun of our president, but by gosh, not these stinking Europeans. And so when that happens, the United States turns to isolation. Fine. We've got two big oceans. Jack Dempsey's the boxing champion. Babe Ruth's hitting home runs. We're dancing the Charleston and the Lindy Hop. The heck with Europe. Next time you get into a problem, we're all even. All right? We beat you twice. You guys, we now just saved you, so we're good. Even up on the revolution. You're now on your own. France wanted Germany either to pay itself into impotence, or if they failed to pay, Germany could be invaded. It was win-win for France. The problem is, who's going to invade Germany? France is terrified of them. The British ran back to their isles. We're mad. We're here in the United States. And so what should be a time of peace, well, that's just not going to happen. France was left to defend itself against an angry Germany. Germany lost territory and a good bit of its male population. They're strangling underneath their debt. But during the 1920s, Germany was back on the road to success. They were being once again welcomed into the European good old boy club, and then the Great Depression hit. But the biggest failure was leaving Russia and Germany out of the peace process. Their location in Europe, their sheer size and industrial capacity meant they have to play a role in European affairs. You've got to include them. Also was the anger festering in Germany. Without military support, the League of Nations could not enforce this peace, and many small countries feel angry at being left out, so it's only a matter of time before war starts again. So that's going to lead us into the Great Depression and World War II. Next video like this to make up for the missed snow days is going to be on the Russian Revolution. All right, have a good night, guys.